What is up, Flockers? That is my fellow lockers and aspiring lockers. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all things Braidlocs. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, then stick around. I know that there are a lot of questions that circulate around Braidlocs and just any type of locks in general. On my channel, I like to provide as much useful, helpful information as possible. Those that are new to my channel, maybe you aren't aware of some of these things. Those that aren't new to my channel, maybe you have been introduced to these things by me or someone else before. But we're gonna go ahead and get into those. Some of the most commonly asked questions are things that people wonder about Braidlocs. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, what are Braidlocs? All right, so if you're looking at what are Braidlocs, Braidlocs are simply that. They are locks that are started with braids. It's a quick and simple answer. We don't even have to spend a lot of time on that. So they are locks that are started out with braids or plaits or whatever you want to call them. Another question that is commonly thought of or asked or searched when you talk about Braidlocs is, are Braidlocs going to mature into full locks? Or will they always stay Braidlocs or braids? And the answer is yes. Braids that are left in and left alone will eventually mature into a full lock. Now, how long it takes for that lock to form completely and not look like a braid or lose the braid pattern completely is different depending on various different things, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But yes, the short answer of it is that Braidlocs are simply locks started with braids, and yes, they do mature into full locks at some point. Another question that is commonly asked is, are Braidlocs and Sisterlocks the same thing? And Braidlocs and Sisterlocks, although they do look similar and have a lot of similarities to them, whether you're talking about the maintenance, whether you're talking about daily upkeep, they are not the same thing. As I mentioned, Braidlocs are established with braids, whereas Sisterlocks are established with the interlocking method. With Braidlocs, you don't necessarily have a specific grid that is done, whereas with Sisterlocks, there is a specific grid that is done depending on your head size, shape, and all that thing that the Sisterloctician chooses for your particular head, as well as the rotation that they choose to start your locks with. There are a lot of similarities with Braidlocs and Sisterlocks, and one of the similarities being that looking at them from afar, they look similar, especially in the beginning before they even start maturing. Whereas, if you have two-strand twists, people are pretty much going to be able to look and tell that they're two-strand twists. Whereas with Braidlocs and Sisterlocks, because of the way that they're started, they tend to mimic each other and look very similar at times. So the interlocking pattern tends to mimic a braid pattern, and they look similar. In the very beginning stages, or the first 6 months or year of Braidlocs, or maybe throughout the entire journey, it can be difficult for people to differentiate whether they're Braidlocs or they're Sisterlocks, simply for that reason. Another question that is hit on a lot when it comes to Braidlocs is, how do you start them? And if there's a specific grid and what the parting has to be. And I kind of alluded to this in the beginning, but the way that you start them is by plaiting your hair. The difference with Sisterlocks and Braidlocs is that with Sisterlocks, there's a whole method to the madness. There's a whole system to it and rules that are followed. Whereas with Braidlocs, it's a lot more free and can be done in any way that you really want or see fit for you. So as Sisterlocks may be very restricted in the sense that it has to be done with a certain grid, and there are interlocking tools that have to be used, the Sisterlock interlocking tools, and other rules that must be followed. With Braidlocs, you're not confined in that same type of constraints, parameters, or box. Braidlocs can be started using any type of parting system. Do like I did and just go in and scoop to doop, and do C-parting, where you just literally scoop and C-part your locks. You can do that if you want to do brick pattern for your parting. If you want to do diamond shape pattern, you can literally do box pattern. You can do whatever you want. If you want to have a specific grid, you can, or like me, you can have no grid at all. That's all up to you and what you decide, whether you're doing it DIY or whether you're doing it through a loctician or Sisterloctician. And that's another difference, is that Sisterlocks can only be installed by a Sisterloctician, whereas Braidlocs can be installed by any loctician or even by yourself or someone that you know. So if you're a DIYer, you can do your Braidlocs yourself. If you're a DIYer and you want Sisterlocks, I don't know if it's technically considered Sisterlocks unless you are an official certified Sisterloctician. Another question that comes up often with Braidlocs is, can you retwist them? And the short answer is absolutely yes. My longer answer is, but why would you want to? Especially if you have Microlocs. Again, as with a lot of these things, at the end of the day, it's up to you and what you decide. But when you retwist, you have to worry about the elements. You know, if you go outside and it rains, you're not going to want to get your retwist wet, because if your hair gets wet, it could unravel and undo the work that you spent. Whether you're using gel or you're just doing water and oil retwist, your hair can unravel. Or if you sweat a lot, if you're like me and when you play sports or even in the summertime, you could just literally walk out your house, your scalp starts sweating, your body starts sweating. That's another reason why retwisting might not be optimal for you, because again, they will just unravel quickly. And instead of something lasting for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, your maintenance might only last for a couple of days, a couple of hours, or a couple of weeks, depending on, you know, the situation and circumstances. So, can you retwist Braidlocs? Absolutely, you could. But again, you kind of have to weigh the pros and the cons. Now, obviously with 300 plus locks, I could go through and you see I have new growth. So I could definitely retwist them and pin them off, you know, look at that. It's clean, it's crisp, and it's gonna be quicker than if I were doing maintenance by interlocking. But again, like I said, the moment that I step outside and it's raining, or I start sweating if I like to exercise a lot, or I go swimming, or I wash my hair, that work is gonna be undone, and we're gonna be back to having puffy roots. So if you don't have a super active lifestyle, you don't sweat a lot, or you live in an area where it's not super humid, or you're not having rain constantly or have to worry about that, or if you don't mind popping a plastic bag over your head or an umbrella anytime there's rain outside, then retwisting might work for you. And it could be a method that you like. Because like I said, instead of spending 5-6 hours doing your hair, maybe you could retwist them in an hour and a half or 2 hours. Another question that comes up is, what is the preferred method for maintaining Braidlocs? I would say that the preferred method, especially if they're micro Braidlocs, is going to be retightening or interlocking. For those that are new to my channel, I have Braidlocs at the ends and the front. We still have braid pattern, but all of this is interlocked. And some of it that even, you know, up higher is not interlocked. It's just where the braid pattern has disappeared. But my preferred method is interlocking, and most microlockers' preferred method for maintenance is interlocking, for all the reasons that I mentioned in the previous part of just not having to worry about your hair unraveling. You know, I can go outside when it's raining and not have to have an umbrella, even if it's just drizzling, and I don't have to worry about my hair unraveling. I can go swimming whenever I want. I can wash my hair as often as I want. I can exercise as often as I want, not have to worry about putting on a headband or having them tied down so that they don't unravel. Even when it's summertime and I sweat, it doesn't affect my hair. It doesn't affect my maintenance at all. And I'm at a place now where I'm 7 to 8 weeks in between when I do my reties. I don't have to worry about my hair for 7 to 8 weeks at all. No maintenance in between that time. Another question that is common and that comes up with Braidlocs is, do Braidlocs swell? And yes, they most absolutely do. Braidlocs mature just like any other locks. Now they do mature differently because of their nature and because of how they are braided, but here, I found one right here. You see that? This one, I can't see it, but from what I can feel, it feels like there's not braid pattern. So hopefully, and it's all the way down to the end. This one doesn't have curly ends, but right here, you see I have budding or swelling near the end of my lock. It's fatter right there. Braidlocs definitely do swell. Okay, they bud just like any other type of lock, and they mature just like any other type of lock. So I'm gonna combine this next question with the last one. Do Braidlocs shrink? And this is what sets Braidlocs apart from other methods like 2-string twist or possibly interlocks. So the great thing about Braidlocs is that you are able to maintain a little bit more of your length when you start them, because Braidlocs they're a stretched style, whereas 2-strand twist and comb coils and things like that, they constrict a lot quicker, which a pro for those, they lock quicker, but you get a lot more shrinkage and you lose a lot more of your length. If you're wanting to keep more of your length, then Braidlocs may be the way for you to go. But that does not mean that Braidlocs do not shrink. Braidlocs do shrink. They still have a ton of shrinkage involved. And the longer your hair is when you start them, the more they're going to shrink, just like with every other starter method. But Braidlocs, because like I said, the nature and the way that they are started, they do have a stretched state and an elongated state, but that doesn't stop them from swelling and it doesn't stop them from shrinking. I always encourage people, if you're going to do Braidlocs, to braid as loosely as possible, not to where they're coming undone and where, you know, you have holes in your braid like that. You don't want holes in your braid. If you're planning on taking them out, then of course, braid tight so that it can be pretty. You know, you got your little micro braids, you're going through your Brandy Norwood phase, Moesha days where she used to rock the micro braids. If you're planning on taking them out in a month or so, then of course, braid them tightly so that they look nice and they stay neat. If you're planning on leaving them in and you want them to lock and mature, then you're gonna need to braid as loosely as possible without there being, you know, big holes in them, because you want them to be able to swell and to be able to mature and to bud like the ones that I've shown you. Oh, I feel like I got another one over here. If it's braided super tight, it probably will eventually one day down the road do all of that stuff. But if you have them super tight, it could take 2, 3, 4 years before those braided parts mature or start to mature. Your best bet is to braid as loosely as possible. I'm 2 years in, and as you see, almost 2 years in, and as you see, I still have braid pattern throughout my locks, and I braided pretty loosely. So that's just part of it. If that is something that bothers you and that is going to unnerve you, then that's something to take into consideration. At the end of the day, all of the locks, no matter how you start them, are going to mature to turn into locks. It might just take a little bit longer for some processes. I would say that Braidlocs probably have the longest, right up there with Interlocks, or maybe even Interlocks mature quicker, but I think Braidlocs are probably the slowest to mature just because of their form. So at the end of the day, you kind of have to weigh, would you rather have a more elongated look that doesn't shrink as much, but you're going to keep the braid pattern longer than you would keep other patterns? Or are you looking for something that's going to swell up and frizz up more and shrink more, but you'll get to your end result quicker? So you have to make those decisions for yourself and weigh them for yourself. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you can join the flock, and also hit that like button so that I know what type of content that you're enjoying. And before you go anywhere, be sure to check out some of the other videos that have popped up on the screen. I'll see you there.